Hi there, continuing my lecture, I'm on page 109. Okay, this is lecture number 3, chapter 5. Okay, we talked about bond listings. Look at page 108. I talked you through that. I focused on the yield to maturity, the last number that you'll see there, 2.42, for our Coca-Cola bonds. And I'm asking you to put that number on hold for a minute. Now, when a bond investor is looking into putting his or her money into a bond, the YTM, the yield to maturity, is a very important number. Now, when I say the word yield, think of putting your money into something and knowing how much you are hoping, how much you'll get back on your money's working for you, okay? So that is the yield. How much will my hard-earned dollars that I put into this investment yield? In this case, it's a bond, of course, okay? So we've got a couple of different ones. I want you to focus in quick review on this last slide, okay? Please remember that bonds trade at a $1,000 face value, and sometimes you're going to pay a little less, sometimes you're going to pay a little more. It shouldn't be too far off, but those numbers that you pay, like 106.8 or 98.6, represent the percentage of the $1,000 par value. Every so often a student says to me, why? Why don't they just say 1,068? Okay, the answer is, I haven't got the slightest idea. Okay, this is just something, presumably to save space, that bond listers did way back when, and that tradition is carried forward. Okay, so please just remember that 106.8 means that's the percentage of the $1,000 face you will pay to buy that bond. You're going to have to pay $1,068 for it. Now, again, to keep my math nice and simple here in this class, I'm going to assume that bonds pay you interest once a year. Okay, in truth, bonds generally, everyone I've seen anyway, pay interest semi-annually. So instead of like our sterling bonds, instead of getting one check for 80 bucks, you would get two checks every 6 months for 40 bucks, okay? One check every 6 months is a better way to put it, okay? So I'm going to ignore that. I'm going to assume, to keep the math simple, that we receive one annual payment, and you already know how to adjust for it. Back from chapter 2, if payments are semi-annual, you would divide the interest rate by 2 and multiply the number of payments by 2. Okay, so I'm not going to relive that for you. YTM, okay, there are several ways to measure yield. YTM is considered the most important. Okay, now, Coke's got a 3.3 face bond in the listing I gave you on page 108. So that means you get 33 bucks a year for every $1,000 bond that you have. Now, why is it only yielding 2.42%? That's less. Well, the clue is in the price. I'll get back into that later, because in a few more pages I'm going to show you how bonds are valued. I started my lecture series for chapter 5 by telling you bonds mathematically are easier to value than stock. I'll show you how easy it is, okay? All right, here's the first. I'm going to give you 3. There are different ways to measure yield. The first one I will give you is called the nominal yield, okay? When you see nominal yield, nomine in Latin means name, so in name alone, okay? Coca-Cola was listed as a 3.3% bond. That is the nominal yield, okay? In other words, how big a check can I expect to receive every single year, assuming this is a $1,000 bond? That's your nominal yield. How much easier can that be, okay? The second one of the 3 is called the current yield. Okay, now here's the deal. If you want to buy one of these Coca-Cola bonds, you can't buy one for $1,000. That's the face amount, of course, that's the par. But if you want to buy one of these puppies, you're going to pay $1,068 bucks for it. That was the price that was quoted, 106.8, right? So, really, you're not putting $1,000 of your money into the pot, you're putting in $1,068. You're getting an annual check of 33 bucks. Current yield means take the amount of interest I get in dollars every year, 33 bucks divided by how much I had to pay to buy that bond, that's 1,068. So, because you've got to pay a little bit more, it's not 3.3%, it is 3.09%, okay? The fact that you had to pay a little bit more money to buy that bond cuts into your yield a tiny bit. That's the current yield, okay? All right, and I've given you a hint about YTM, what YTM is all about, so more on that after. Okay, yield to maturity. We're going to stop by introducing a term. I'm going to get there eventually, but I'm going to take the long way around just to be very clear. Okay, the required rate of return on an investment. Remember, chapter 1, risk and reward go together. Okay? Now, you've got money, you have to put it somewhere. I want to invest in that. Okay. Every investment has different amounts of risk. So, there has to be some rate of return that you have in your mind that's just enough to induce you to invest in a certain place. Okay? Hopefully you'll make more than that, but there's some minimum, okay? If your required rate of return is, I don't know, let's say 3%, okay? And you look at an investment and say, oh, that's risky. 3% isn't good enough, okay? But now you say, well, here's another investment, that's risky too. That's about 5%. That's enough to compensate me for this level of risk. Okay, so you're going to have a buy-in limit, a bottom limit, your required rate of return. That's just big enough to make you say to yourself, self, yes, that rate of return is enough to induce me to make the investment. That's not how much you ought to settle for now. It's a baseline. It's how much you need to make you commit your money, okay? That's a very important concept to us. There are other types of rates of return as well. This is the first one. All right, any questions? Make sure you get back to me. I want to call it R sub I, okay? Sometimes we call it R sub B for a bond, R sub S for stock. I'm just going to call it R sub I for an investment. It's an investment in a financial asset. Now, I've already told you the price that you should pay for a financial asset today is generally equal to the present value of all expected future cash flows that you think that investment will throw off. Okay? So we're going to present value those. And you need to do a present value calculation, you need an interest rate. Okay? So, you know you've got a pretty good idea about the future cash flows. Number 2, you are going to have to discount it, which means you need an interest rate. Okay, that's number 3. You've got a present value, number 2. Number 3, you can't do number 2 without an interest rate to use a discounting function for. All right, what are you going to use as an interest rate? The face rate? No, never, never, never consider using the face rate of interest when you do one of these things. That's the secret on valuing a bond, ladies and gentlemen. You don't use the face rate. I'll show you why after. You're going to use your required rate of return. In this case, noted as R sub I. What is that? That's the market rate. Okay? We assume it's not just your required rate of return, you as an individual. It's you and all your brothers and sisters out there in the market. Okay? The market's required rate of return is going to vary as situations change in the bond market, in the interest market. Now, the face rate of your bond, the par coupon rate, is going to stay the same. But interest rates for comparable investments, depending on their risk, will fluctuate throughout the life of that bond, okay? So, don't use the face rate to discount. Use the required rate of return. I will have to give that to you. Okay? That's how you're going to discount a future stream of cash flows to today. And that's how much you should pay for that bond. Okay? So usually the face rate will remain the same. The market will fluctuate rather. The required rate of return will vary. Okay, now, as we've already seen, Coca-Cola's bonds have been around for a while. Okay, when they were issued, comparable rates for a company of Coca-Cola's risk were more than likely around 3%. And that's why Coca-Cola issued 3.3% bonds. Now, in the meantime, interest rates rise. And now let's say Pepsi and Coke are comparable in risk. I think we can all agree on that. But interest rates generally are up now. Coke is still merrily paying their 3.3%. But now rates have changed. The game has changed. And Pepsi wants to issue bonds. They've got to pay 7%. That's what the market's demanding for the risk they perceive in Pepsi. Or Coke, if Coke were issuing these new bonds, okay? So which one are you going to buy? You've got $1,000 to invest right at the start when these bonds are issued. You'll probably buy them for $1,000. Do you want to buy a Coca-Cola bond for 3%? Or do you want to buy a Pepsi bond for 7%? I don't know about you, but I would rather get a check for $70 every year instead of $33, right? So that means those bonds can't possibly both trade for the same price. One of them is worth more to you. That brings us to the concept of the bond discount and premium. I haven't forgotten yield to maturity yet. I can't get you there without covering this territory first. So the more time that goes by, okay, now keeping in mind that bonds are long-term. Longer term means there's more likelihood that interest rates will fluctuate above and below that rate, that flat rate that Coke is paying. Our sub-I is likely to change. Now remember, also, you do not have to hold a bond to maturity. I don't know many people who do. Okay? So if you want to buy out of a bond, you can sell it on the open market. There's a demand for them. Okay, but in the meantime, interest rates have changed. Coca-Cola's 3.3% bond governed back then. But in the meantime, rates may have gone up, they may have gone down. Will that bond therefore sell for the $1,000 face? The answer is probably not. All right, let's look at sterling. Our sterling bond, which if memory serves was like a 20-year bond, wasn't it? They pay 8% no matter what. That bond's going to stay at 8%. $80 of interest for one bond every year. Now, if interest rates have changed and comparable bonds to sterling's risk are paying 10%, okay, and you want to sell your sterling bond, I'm not going to buy it for $1,000 because it's only paying me $80 a year. I can take the same risk and find something that will pay me $100 a year, 10%. Okay. Now, the interest rate might have gone the other way in the market. Comparable bonds to sterling's risk are paying 5%. Okay, now if you're holding one of those bonds, you've got something that's paying you 8% every year. Why are you going to sell it? Okay, if you then get $1,000, look around, and the only thing you can buy will pay you $50 a year, 5%, right? Now you're in the advantage. You've got something paying 8% in a 5% world. What has to adjust? What's going to adjust to make up for this difference in interest rates, ladies and gentlemen, between the face and the market, the required rate of return, is the bond market. That's going to be the price of the bond at which this bond trades in the open market. Okay? All right. This is everything I just said. Okay, so now, if rates have gone up and current rates that you can get are better than sterling's, then, and you've got one, I might still be willing to buy it from you, but I'm not going to pay you $1,000 for it. I can go out and spend my $1,000 and get something better. So if you want to sell it to me, you're going to have to sell it to me at less than $1,000. That's called a discount, okay? Because if you don't, I'll take my money and go somewhere else. Thank you very much. On the other hand, if current rates are lower in the market than sterling's 8%, and you're thinking of selling, now the position of advantage changes from me to you. Now it's more of a seller's market, okay? So you will sell me your bond, but you're going to charge me more than $1,000. That's called a premium. So if you're the seller and you charge more than the face, more than the par, that's a premium. If you are the seller and you have to accept less, then you're selling at a discount. There's the answer. That's where the YTM, the yield to maturity, comes from. That is why bonds are valued not at $1,000, but sometimes a little bit higher, sometimes a little bit lower, because rates can either be better on the outside or worse on the outside than the face amount that you're getting from the bond that you currently have. Okay? The only time that a bond should trade for $1,000 in the secondary bond market is when the required rate of return, by purest coincidence, just happens to be equal to the face rate. Okay? So, now let's intuit this, okay? Look back at Coca-Cola's 3.3% bond. It's selling for $1,068. We can make an assumption about today's market because that $1,068 is determined by today's market required rate of return. Okay? So if you're holding one of these Coke bonds and you're not willing to sell it for anything less than $1,068, that implies that it's got value, a hidden value. That means that 3.3% the face, must be higher than the current market rate of interest. So you'll still sell it, but because you got something sweet, you want to make the buyer pay a little bit more for it. Okay? So when a bond sells for a premium, that tells you that interest rates out there in the same market, same risk for other investments must be not as good as Coca-Cola. Okay? Now, as that bond moves to its maturity, it's going to be worth $1,000. Please remember that. Okay? When that bond matures, the bond issuer must pay you, the bondholder, $1,000. Okay? In the meantime, what are you getting? Well, you're only going to get that $1,000 back one time, right? If I owe you money, I'm not going to pay back what I owe you twice, am I? No, only once. But there's another cash flow here too, not just the return of your principal, the interest that you're receiving every single year. Now that's income to you. Okay, now, you know what that's going to be from Coca-Cola. It's going to be $33 a year. Sterling, it'll be $80 a year. Okay, now think about this. You're the buyer. If you buy this bond for a discount, you don't just make out by the amount of interest you receive. You make out because you bought something that's going to mature to $1,000 for less than $1,000. You bought it at a discount. That's another way to make money. Okay? Now, on the other hand, if you bought that bond at a premium, you paid a little extra for it. Now that's going to cut into your income. You'll still have your interest, but the amount of your return is going to be a little bit less because you had to pay more than $1,000 for something that will be worth $1,000 when it matures. Okay, so a bond investor wants to understand what their real yield is, if factoring in whether they paid a little bit less for the bond or had to pay a little bit more. That's what the yield to maturity does. It includes whether you got a break or whether you got stiffed when you bought this investment for something other than $1,000. Okay? So please always remember to factor that in. When you do, the true overall yield, not just the interest, but whether there was a premium or a discount involved, that, friends, that percentage is the yield to maturity. Coca-Cola seems to have 3.3% bonds, but because you've got to pay a little bit extra for it, that cuts into your 3.3%, and the yield to maturity is lower. It is, I think the number was 2.42%. Okay? Yes, 2.42. Page 108. Okay, now here's the kicker. Yield to maturity, if you want to calculate it algebraically, is very, very difficult, if not impossible. Okay? Because you're solving for some exponential factors. What do? You can use Excel, okay? You can use tables. There were some tables, a lot like the ones in the big blue book that I showed you, or that I have in the appendix to my book. You can use a financial calculator. You can use trial and error, okay? And we'll see that in capital investing later on. But there's a shortcut. Oh, I love shortcuts. Don't fool yourself into thinking that bond traders don't use them, okay? Yes, they do. They use rules of thumb. They use shortcuts. Assuming the horseshoes and hand grenades factor. Close is usually good enough. Okay? When they actually make a trade, now they've got to zero it in and be accurate. But in the meantime, when my trader wants to call me up and just chat about my interest in, no pun intended, whether I'm interested in a bond, then she is quite likely to use a shortcut with the understanding that I will know it is a shortcut, it's close. It's acceptable, it's an approximation, it is commonly used in the industry. It looks like this. This is formula 5.4 on page 113 in my text. To come up with the approximate YTM, you do a quotient. Okay, the numerator of that quotient is you take the total of interest in dollars that you get every year. Okay? You add to that the difference. Now here's another fraction, okay? The numerator of the second fraction is the difference between the principal payment, $1,000, and the bond price that you pay. Divided by, that difference divided by how many years left till maturity. All that stuff added together gives you the numerator. We divide that by the weighted average of the bond price and the principal payment. Again, the bond price is what you pay for one bond. the principal payment is $1,000, how much you'll get when it matures. Now in the old days, we used to use 50-50. We'd add the two together and divide by 2, okay? We've gotten a little more sophisticated now. More weight in this weighted average is assigned to the price that you pay for the bond. So we use 60% for that. 0.6, 60% times the actual bond price at which you purchase it, plus 40%, 0.4, times the face of the bond, $1,000. Now, one very astute student said to me last semester, what does that 9 after that bracket mean? Is that an exponent? No, it is not. I apologize for that. That superscripted 9 you see there after the words principal payment, close parens. That is a footnote to the end of book notes. Okay, so forget about that 9. I'll find a way to fix that one fine day. Okay? I'll try to put a little space there now so you don't make a mistake. Okay, very good. Let me save that for you. All right, now, again, always try to do a little intuitive math first, ladies and gentlemen. Let's try Coca-Cola. You already know that the yield to maturity is 2.42. All right, now, time is up, so I'm going to leave us right there, and I'll resume this lecture probably tomorrow. Today is the 13th of June, and I've been in faculty meetings all day, so I will pick this up in all likelihood tomorrow on the 14th, okay? Have yourselves a nice evening.